Hello, welcome back to Scuttlebutt, a Marine Corps Association podcast. I'm Nick. I'm here with Vic.
Hey.
And Will's back this week.
Howdy.
Hey, full house.
Yeah, no, you guys made it seem like I was like dead or something last week. Oh yeah, we miss them. Like,
We were talking about your youthful energy.
And your joie de vivre.
you're like what, like 5 years older than me? Like,
It makes a difference when you cross the 30 line.
yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I'm sprinting there.
Hey man,
as is.
you were thoroughly and genuinely missed.
And
man.
you quoted one of my favorite quotes, which is like, you know, that like really brought
I think
like a
I
tear to my
butchered
eye.
it though.
Oh yeah, but it's,
Yeah.
I'm probably butchering it.
Yeah, so I think at this point the listeners have realized that more times than not, at least from this microphone, I just open my mouth and stuff just comes tumbling out. Sometimes it's gold. More times than not, you want to bag it up.
No,
and-
give
and
yourself
put
a
it-
little credit, but as we always say to our dear listeners, please, for the love of God, do your research on anything we say, even if we are right, because then you learn stuff and it's great for everyone.
Yeah, and call us on it.
You know what we didn't do? We didn't call our listeners dear listeners, because that is something William does.
Man, and you know what? I'm sure it was felt.
Yeah.
It was like a sort of a symbiotic, like,
They need to feel like they're
Drop.
loved, you know?
Yeah.
because they are absolutely. We failed you, and I'm sorry.
It was
For at least for a week. Now we're back.
all right. But we have a pretty long interview today with Army Colonel retired James Driscoll.
Yep.
Former Pentagon chaplain.
Yep.
And this was a really timely one this month, and I kind of didn't realize it as I listened to it the first time. Was he talks about diversity for a good like solid 15-minute chunk in
Sure.
there. And what better month to talk about diversity than Black History Month?
Yeah, absolutely. And he definitely addresses religious pluralism, which can in certain circles be a lightning rod topic. But I think he did such a great job of articulating the benefits of it, not to say that the commandant and assistant commandant are using them as talking points. I think they've explicitly said that they are not. But there is this tendency, and we talk about institutions, trusted institutions, from the outside looking in, that this is things that they're supposed to say. And I've really felt like Colonel Driscoll addressed these issues in a very genuine, in a very caring way, and in a way that paid due to the contribution of diverse thought, and that comes obviously from spiritual background and ethnicity.
Diversity as a strength rather than a perceived weakness.
For sure. And that idea, and I know both of our previous speaker or interviewees mentioned this, but that idea that through pluralism, the role of the chaplain is as a facilitator and a resource, not as a sort of pigeonholed, hey, this is what my faith does. If you're not a part of my faith group, there's nothing I can do for you. I really felt like this is a nice progression in that professionalism of caring. So Colonel Driscoll, and for those who aren't aware of who he is, just really quick, he is, I think his actual title is Assistant to the President of Wesley Theological Seminary, but his actual role is as the director of the military chaplaincy doctorate program at Wesley Theological Seminary. And so, as we mentioned, he's been the chaplain of the Pentagon. He served as a reserve Army officer. He was augmented. He served on IMA billet and stayed. He was chaplain to U.S. Forces Europe. And he's a hospital chaplain down at Chesapeake Bay, down south of Virginia. And so his ministry is very diverse. And so, but yeah, especially as someone who's in the role of developing chaplains, and I thought it was really important to get with him and get some of his thoughts on chaplaincy. So I thought it was really informative.
And it's really good listening to it after the first two interviews, I think, because he kind of takes everything that we've already heard and just kind of takes it to that 200 level course, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah. I liked how he was talking about, he'd go out to the field with his reserve unit, but then if they're still on the field, he had to come back Saturday night, prep for his Sunday service because he's still the pastor of his congregation, and then would go back out to the field after it was over. So I thought that was an interesting dynamic to what a pastor who is also a reserve chaplain has to do. That was pretty cool.
All right. Well, without any further ado, part 3 of our Four Chaplain series. Past Vic and Chaplain Driscoll, take it away.
The Ss Dorchester, a civilian liner converted for military service, left New York on January 23, 1943, en route to Greenland, carrying approximately 900 personnel and crew. It was part of a convoy of 3 ships escorted by Coast Guard cutters Tampa, Escanaba, and Comanche. During the early morning hours of February 3rd, off Newfoundland in the North Atlantic, the vessel was torpedoed by the German submarine U-223. Chaplains George Fox, Alexander Good, Clark Poling, and John Washington helped the men board lifeboats and gave up their own life jackets when the supply ran out. The chaplains joined arms, said prayers, and sang hymns as they went down with the ship.
I'd like to welcome everybody to another Scuttlebutt interview. And today I am so honored to have retired Colonel James Driscoll. He is currently the special assistant to the president and adjunct professor at Wesley Theological Seminary in Washington, D.C. He has served as the Army Chief of Chaplain Staff from 2015 to 2019. He was U.S. Central Command Deputy Command Chaplain from 2014 to 2015, and Army Reserve Chaplain, also clergy within the United Methodist Church, and chaplain at the Chesapeake Regional Healthcare Center. Sir, thank you so much for being a part of the show.
And thank you so much, Vic. It's great to be here, and I am looking forward to our conversation. Been looking forward to it for several months now, and this is great that we can get together today and do this. So
yeah, absolutely. Just so our listeners have a little bit of context. So I, as part of my MFA program, I attended a few classes over at Wesley Theological Seminary in their Religion Arts department, and was introduced to your military chaplaincy program just sort of by proxy. But when everyone found out that I was a retired Marine, everyone, wanted to mention that to me, and I thought that was super cool. But really hadn't really started delving into it much, and then thought one of the things I'd like to do with the show is to introduce our listeners to the military chaplains, what military chaplains do. Obviously every unit has a chaplain, but I don't know a whole lot of people really fully grasp what it is that a chaplain does for their unit, for the service. And so I reached out to Colonel Driscoll, and he was kind enough to sit down with me, and we had a few conversations, and I'm like, sir, I need to get you on the show. And so thank you so much for being here. This has really been great, and it's been really fun getting to know you, and so I'm looking forward to this.
Fantastic. Thank you. I've enjoyed getting to know you, and look forward to what we have to share, and it should be a great experience this
absolutely
time that we're together. Fantastic.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And as we've talked about, this is all part of our Four Chaplain series. And we are talking and celebrating the service and the sacrifice of the four chaplains during this time period where, we are looking and exploring themes of faith and service and the military. So, sir, I know I just sort of prattled on with some of your accomplishments and your CV, if you will. But, sir, if you wouldn't mind taking a little bit of time and just sort of walking us along your path and how you came to be where you are now.
Sure. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And if I get too wordy or start going down some rabbit trails here or something, just go ahead and.
So this is Scuttlebutt. Our backbone is rabbit trails. So let's dive in.
Okay. Very good. So I have come through a path of chaplaincy that's been as a local church pastor and a National Guard / Reserve chaplain. That's been sort of my path that I have taken. Believe it or not, for 36 and a half years, I did this. And
Wow.
so, yeah, a lot of people aren't even 36 and a half years old. And I've been being a chaplain for that long, or a chaplain candidate. I guess and I look back, I was thinking about what I was going to say about this, and I have to go all the way back to growing up in a small community in Western Pennsylvania, active in a church, being nurtured by parents, caring parents, my father, my grandfather, a pastor of the church, and in all of that, growing in a faith, being grounded in a faith that shaped my life and nurtured my life and connected me to God and to Jesus, and at the same time developing a sense of service and a spirit of service that really became part of my identity. And it's interesting. My father died in December,
Wow.
well, just a little under a year ago, and in the
Okay.
process, I've been thinking about him, and of course, he was very active in our community, and the local newspaper interviewed me about him so that they did an article about him, and of course writing his obituary and so forth. And the thing that, as I was thinking about my father, that kept coming up again and again and again was that his whole life was about service to the community, service to the nation. He spent a few years in the Navy during the Korean War, and then I thought, well, looked at my grandfather, my great grandfather, and I thought, well, that's sort of been a theme of our family, has been serving in some way. And so I thought that's been part of who I was from the beginning, nurturing the idea of service, offering back to a community, to an organization, to something bigger than myself. And so that's been a part of who I am, combined with a faith that has led me to where I am today, to the point where I still try to live out and embody that kind of service. And so that I guess combining both of those together, then military seemed like a great place to be able to do that service. My dad talked so powerfully about his time serving the 4 years while he was in the Navy, and I thought, I want to do something military to serve and to give back, and I want to serve God and country. And so I began, while I was in college, exploring a sense of calling to ministry, and came to realize that in order to be a minister, I would have to go on to seminary to get a master's of divinity degree to become a pastor in the United Methodist Church. I discovered that while I was in seminary, I could be commissioned as a second lieutenant in a chaplain candidate program with the Army. So that program is still out there. So for folks that are thinking about ministry, all the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, all have a chaplain candidate program where you can be commissioned as an O1 and start out at the very basics of a military career. And so I was a second lieutenant while I was in seminary at Wesley Seminary. I did 1 year of seminary in Ohio, but then I came to Wesley, and to see that I'm still connected to Wesley is that's very meaningful to me, to continue to have that connection. But I came to Wesley, went to Virginia Tech undergraduate with the Corps of Cadets. That was another part of that service experience as well. And then Wesley Seminary, coming through as a chaplain candidate, and following through my ordination in the United Methodist Church, I thought at that time that I would want to get out of seminary and become an active duty chaplain. That was in my mind, that I would serve in that way. But part of the requirement to be a pastor in the United Methodist Church is a couple of years of practical experience after the education. So finished my seminary, and I was assigned to a little country church in Winchester, Virginia.
Yeah.
northwest corner of Virginia, west of Washington D.C., west of where you live, I think.
Yeah, not too far though.
Yeah. So I was country church outside of Winchester, and I went there and was doing that and serving at that time in the National Guard. I started with the Maryland National Guard, ended up from there into the Virginia National Guard, and found that connection for me just worked. I was ministering at a local church, loving a congregation of good people, and once a month going and being with the soldiers in the woods or at drill, or the 2 weeks in the summer, and so that was the chaplain candidate program is a reserve or National Guard program. And so by the time I was ordained and qualified to be a full-fledged chaplain, I was finding meaning and balance by being a local church pastor and a National Guard citizen soldier chaplain. And so that just worked for me, and I just continued that relationship all through my military career, various times being mobilized or used in an active capacity for one way or another, but by and large finding a balance between a local church and military. And sometimes that was a juggling act. Sometimes it meant being in the field late at night and leaving and driving home late at night so I could do a service in my church the next morning, and going back out to a armory in the afternoon. I mean, it was just a balancing act over the years, but it was just rich, and the ministry on the Army side of things complemented what was going on in the church, and I felt like I could take things from my church back to the Army side of things. And so I guess kind of what this is a recruiting moment to say, chaplains, consider being a Reserve or National Guard chaplain. It combines great with other ministries, whether it's in a local church or some other setting. So over the years, I have served as pastor of several churches around Virginia, and at the same time still continued with either the Virginia National Guard, went for a period of time to the D.C. National Guard. The D.C. National Guard has a great National Guard, and whenever I was senior enough to be eligible to be a command chaplain, 06 chaplain, D.C. was in need of a 06 chaplain to come be their Joint Force command chaplain, and so they reached across the river to Virginia and invited me to come over to D.C., and so that's where I became a command chaplain in the Washington, D.C. National Guard. After my service of that, went into the reserves, into their IMA program, Individual Mobilization Augmentee, and worked in the Chief of Chaplain's office in an IMA status for a few years until in 2014 I got mobilized into an active status, where I remained until 2019 when it was time to hit a mandatory retirement date, and now here I am. So that's kind of my story. I could say more about the Virginia Guard or the DC Guard. I probably can say more about some mobilizations that I had that were in there, but I'll just pause there and see if that's kind of what you need to know. If there's anything else where I should go from here.
No, thank you so much for that. That's really fascinating. I like that citizen soldier chaplain. That sounds like a movie title.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes. But one of the things I wanted to, and just listening to your to sort of your path through your career, is one of the things that strikes me in a devotional I was listening to recently. They talked about how Jesus was always busy but never in a hurry. Could you talk a little bit about what that was like then, having to sort of balance or juggle those three things of being a citizen, having your pastoral duties to your civilian congregation, then having your ministry duties to your guard unit, and then also having to be a soldier. I mean, that you're in uniform. You gotta get in the mud with the
Right.
troops. So
Right.
what was that
Right.
like?
Yeah, it was so, I wouldn't trade it for anything. It just has been the most awesome experience of my life to be able to have that, and it makes me very unique in some ways, because among clergy, there really are very few who take that path of balancing a civilian ministry with a military ministry. And so there were very, very few who knew exactly what my life was like, and what those challenges and those blessings were. But one of the things about the military ministry was that the ministry happened uh, with the soldiers, with the troops. And if they were out on a bivouac of some kind, if they were headed on a road march, if they were on the range, I was there with them. And that was just tremendous, to be taking ministry to where the people were. In my local church, I ministered on Sunday mornings. I visited people in the hospital. I sometimes went and saw them in their homes, but very rarely was I sitting with them, in in the workplace. I mean, that is not what we do as the pastor of a church. But as a chaplain, we are with people in the workplace, providing support, providing encouragement, providing the comfort, being there for joys, being there for challenges. And so that was great. And I also need to add that the other piece in there being balanced was my family.
Right.
And
I didn't mention that. Yeah.
my wife, I'm so blessed, because she came from a family where her dad came up through the National Guard. And so her whole life as a child had dad going off on weekends and going away for time in the summer. And so she knew the routine and the rhythm of that. And so it was just natural for her to continue and accept that for our family. And so she was the one that sort of has held it all together for our family. But I must say, in doing that, there are many, many times when, we'll be together and she'll be saying, I remember a time we did this or that. And I'll say, I don't remember that. And she, oh no, that's because you were off at annual training, or you were at drill weekend. You missed that birthday party, or you missed that, family gathering, or something. And so part of it is being accepting of the fact that you do have times away, whether it's, on a smaller sense of a weekend here and there, or of a full-blown mobilization and deployment. And I have to add in there, and I can talk about this. I've had some mobilizations, and they were very unique mobilizations that I can tell you about, but mine were never being mobilized to actually be sent to the theater, if you will. I've always been mobilized into a support setting, into a means of making sure the ministry got done and facilitating the ministry that was happening out there. And not that I wasn't standing by ready and willing to go, but every time the call came, it was, we need you to step in and cover this or do this in order that can happen out there. So and like I said, most recently from 2014 to 2019 in the CENTCOM and Pentagon headquarters.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things we talk about a lot on this show is, stories matter. Everybody's stories matter. And so I really appreciate you giving us that sort of headquarters and support aspect of service and of ministry. I think those things are important. One of the things I did want to ask is, was there much overlap? Like, how much? I don't mean to imply that you preach the gospel differently, but at the same time, are there certain things that resonated more with the troops that wouldn't resonate with your with your parish, or vice versa? Or are there lessons learned here that, like, hey, this really worked with the troops, and then, no, well, it didn't really work with my my civilian congregation, or anything? Like, how much I guess overlap was there, or was it sort of like, here I'm a soldier, here I'm a pastor?
Right, right. Uh, yeah, interesting to think about that overlap. When I was with the troops, when chaplains with the troops, one thing about it is that we go there and we are there for everybody. And so I'm going in, having been approved by the whatever the endorsing body they call it, the agency that sends you, the Methodist Church in my case, has said I'm somebody that they want to go out and do this extension ministry. And so I go out and do that, and I wear a cross on my collar. The rabbis wear tablets, the imams wear their symbol. But the fact of it is that I'm going into that setting to be there for everybody and to provide for everybody. And so that is one thing that is unique about chaplaincy. And if I have a Christian service, obviously I'm preaching about Jesus. But if I've got some Jewish soldiers in my unit, or some Islamic soldiers, or any other faith group or non-faith group, my role isn't to go there to convert them to my faith group, but it's to go and be there so that I can ensure that they have the chance to practice their faith, whatever that may be. And that could be finding a rabbi somewhere that I'm going to bring out to a situation to be there with the Jewish soldiers, or getting a group of soldiers that need a Catholic mass taken into a nearby Catholic church so they can go to mass. And so it's that's one piece that there's overlap to the extent that I'm doing my Christian ministry with the Christians that are there, but the chaplain work is so much broader than that, because we are to find ways to provide for and support all of those others who are in our formations, and as diverse as that might be. So that's one thing in the local church that, I'm focused on caring for a Christian congregation, and I'm going in on Sunday mornings and conducting my Christian service. But when I'm in the military setting, it's a much broader ministry that is taking place among a much greater mix of people. And I found the diversity to be very, very powerful, very enriching to me, to go into that diversity. Whether it was, my churches were always usually middle class, white folks. Unfortunately, our churches tend to kind of congregate along those groups and those settings. But when I would go off to be in an Army setting, when I was the command chaplain in Washington, D.C., and went into the inner city of D.C. to be with my troops there, well, I had an entirely different demographic of folks who were in my parish there in D.C. that was just so enriching to me. And then I found that I could bring that experience back to the church, to the place where I came back richer and stretched from having been with a diverse group of people, and bring that to the parish. And so the two, there was an interplay between the two. And then another thing that is a sort of a side benefit that I found was very interesting, was that there were certain people in my church, oftentimes men, who maybe didn't have much of a interest in, or didn't really feel that they connected with the pastor, the preacher, that they just didn't have a need for that, or maybe they didn't come to church, but their wife did, and they felt like, that was maybe not a part of their life. But many times these men were veterans. A lot of them had served, maybe they of a Korean or Vietnam vintage in my parishes, and when they found out that I was in the military, well, that just created a bridge, took down a wall, and I can't tell you how many times there were people that, if I didn't have the military, probably would not have had much need for me other than to say hello, but because of the military, ended up with conversations and interactions and meals together and ministry moments with them that never would have been there if I didn't have this. And it just, for many people, gave me a legitimacy or a respectability that that just I think of it time and time again when it just created a bridge, and even does even now. It's interesting because in addition to my work at Wesley, I work in a local hospital here in Chesapeake, Virginia, part-time, and my name badge that I wear says veteran on it. And you'd be amazed at how many times I go into a patient's room and they look at that and they say, "Chaplain, you're a veteran," and of course here in the Norfolk area, many of the
Wow.
people are veterans,
Yeah.
Navy folks, and so immediately there's a connection and a legitimacy, and a lot of the initial work of trying to build a bridge is done, and I've already got a connection with those folks. So that military chaplaincy background has built many, and still continues to build bridges.
Wow, that's really great. I hadn't even thought really of that, how community and that sense of community, that sense of belonging, really opens up for a deeper relationship, and sort of like you said, sort of fast forwards a lot of the
Yeah,
getting to know you stuff and these sort of apprehensions, like,
right.
hey, chaplain, like,
Yeah,
I'm
all this,
good, but that, other than that, then yeah, those walls do come down. I
right.
hadn't.
There's a legitimacy that is conferred that usually would take a long time to earn or build up, and
Yeah, that relationship is almost already established.
yeah, yeah.
That's really great. We'd mentioned some of your past, and when we had talked in a previous conversation, I just wanted to share this story with our listeners. But can you talk a little bit about the time that you got on one of your IMA billets when you showed up at the Pentagon, and some of the news that they dropped on your lap within the first few moments that you were there?
Sure. Yes. Uh, yeah, one of my mobilizations was as the deputy Pentagon chaplain, and I was an IMA at that. I think that's what you're referring
Yes, sir.
to.
Absolutely.
Yes, yeah, and so I got the call as an IMA from the chief of chaplain's office, and the call came in that the deputy Pentagon chaplain was going to be sent forward. There was a need in Iraq. Someone had to come home because they were sick or somehow couldn't complete their tour, one of the chaplains there. And so the quickest way to respond to that, and the quickest person that they could get up and in processed and sent out, was the person that was serving as the deputy Pentagon chaplain. And just as a way of background, because many people don't realize, there is a chaplain's office in the Pentagon that is basically the base chaplain, the post chaplain of the Pentagon. The chaplain, the deputy chaplain, a NCO, and that is their ministry, and they minister to the Pentagon, provide all the same services that you would get from your base chaplain at Quantico or at Fort Belvoir or wherever, to the Pentagon, and that's a separate function from, there's chaplains in the Pentagon who are there working for the chief of chaplains, doing the administrative duties and the recruiting duties and
Sir.
all of that. But the Pentagon chaplain's office is the chaplain to the Pentagon. And so got this call to go and be the deputy Pentagon chaplain for a period of about 6 months. And so this was going to be this was just an opportunity that whenever the call came that I just couldn't believe, because it was to as a reservist to get to go and work in the Pentagon like this was such a unbelievable experience. And so I show up and I'm gonna go and get oriented to the job there. And Chaplain Ralph Benson was the colonel, the 06, who was the Pentagon chaplain, and he'd been around the Army for a long time. He'd been actually Pentagon chaplain during 9/11 and was in the midst of all of the tragedy there. And or I think he came shortly after 9/11. I don't think he was the one there at that time. It came after. In any case, he had a long history and was much loved and so forth. And so I show up and am orienting with him, and he says, "There's one thing that I need to tell you." He said, "I am in a couple of weeks beginning my terminal leave. I'm retiring." And yeah. So you've been mobilized to come and be the deputy, but you are actually the acting Pentagon chaplain for the next 5 or 6 months until my replacement shows up on the ground and takes over. So
Welcome aboard.
exactly. And so I was immediately thrust into a very unexpected, unbelievable, rich, meaningful ministry. Making sure that there are various services throughout the week that take place various days at the Pentagon. There are masses, there are Islamic services, there are people that drop by the office for pastoral counseling. There are many ceremonies. Just about every ceremony that takes place in the Pentagon needs an invocation or a benediction, and the Pentagon chaplain's office provides those. And usually the people that are hosting those ceremonies are, some folks like the Secretary of the Army or Secretary of the Navy or something like that. So all of a sudden, I'm coming in as a reservist to be the deputy Pentagon chaplain, and immediately become the acting Pentagon chaplain. And it was a surprise. It was a little overwhelming, and it was a blessing that was so rich. That was experience that I wouldn't have had any other way. And I'm as I think about it now, just thankful thinking about that opportunity.
Yeah, that's a great story. And I just I don't want to say it's good to see, but we do in this case, I think, see that the things don't change when you're in uniform just because you have a cross or a crescent moon on your collar.
Right.
You are still a soldier. You're
Yes.
still an airman, sailor, Marine, and yeah, this happens.
I will I'll carry on and
Carry on,
we'll,
full
we'll
30
make
inch step.
we'll make the mission. We'll make it happen. And
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's great. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit here, sir, and talk some about the themes of faith in the military. Obviously, as we celebrate the Four Chaplains, service obviously comes to mind for sure. But as we see with most narratives and stories that come from the military, the ones that are the most well known, obviously, are the ones that exemplify heroism, sacrifice, and sometimes the stories of those who are just nose to the grindstone, doing their thing to keep people alive, support the mission. Sometimes those stories do get a little lost, and I want to bring more of this awareness and more of this appreciation for what we all do as men and women in uniform, those of faith and those not of faith, but these stories that matter to us all. And so could we talk a little bit then about what is the role of the Chaplain Corps?
Right. Yes. And there in the Army chaplaincy, what we say, our bottom line up front is we nurture the living, we care for the wounded, and we honor the dead. Nurture, care, and honor. And that if you went around the Pentagon and outside on the hallway outside of the chief of chaplain's office, those words are prominent, and other places there are plaques, and there are, I don't think there are bumper stickers, but there are other places where it would say that, in nurture the living, care for the dying, honor the dead. And so basically that's, in a nutshell, everything we do is around those things. And we we have a calling to be there as a branch. We are about nurture, care, and honor, and you see it all the time. Obviously the story of the Four Chaplains is the hallmark story of that happening in the military.
Absolutely.
And those chaplains were on that ship as it was going down, and they were caring, and they were singing, and they were praying, and they were giving away their own life vests, and they were diverse in doing that. They held hands, but there was a rabbi and a Catholic priest and a Methodist and a Reformed pastor, and they were the chaplains in their last moments, nurturing and caring for and honoring. And so that's at the bottom line of what we do. And it's really, I am so blessed in the work that I do right now with Wesley Seminary, because they've given me opportunity to work and nurture this program that is reaching out and supporting chaplains around the world. And just this week I've had I'm to retire from the military and still have so much interaction with wonderful military folks, as I am just so blessed to do that. And so this week I saw was in conversation with a chaplain that is going to take a class that I'm doing in January. And I reached out to her, and she is in Ramstein in the Air Force Base, and she's an Air Force chaplain, and Jewish rabbi. And I think she might have been like the first female rabbi in the Air Force or something like that. And so we were talking about the class, but then she was talking about how what she was involved with there at Ramstein most recently was receiving and being in ministry to the Afghan refugees who are escaping, being flown from Afghanistan into Germany. And so she was involved in that. And then just last week, there was an article that was published, and you might be interested in, maybe I even sent this to you, I'm not sure, it was published by the United Methodist News Service about an imam who was engaged in that same kind of mission. Well, it turns out that imam is also one of our students, and so we've got in Ramstein, the imam and the rabbi are both our students. My students are students at Wesley Seminary, and the news actually did a feature service on this imam, and I asked the rabbi. I said, do you by any chance know Chaplain Ali? Imam? She said, oh yeah, we're great friends. Our offices are in the same building. We have been ministering to these refugees together, and the two of them are in different cohorts at Wesley, so they did not know that they were both Wesley students until just recently. And so they've connected, and they actually have a friendship that goes back a ways. And so in the process, though they're doing the work of ministry, caring for the soldiers and airmen in the hospital, but then extending that to these refugees that are coming through, and both of them ministering in this setting to these Afghanistan refugees. And so that's, and then another experience I had today was zooming like this with a Air Force chaplain who is a chaplain that I'm mentoring in our program, and we we're talking about the I'm going to be his reader for his doctoral dissertation, and we're talking about that, and he was saying, yeah, he said, I've had some challenges keeping up with some of the due dates and so forth for this, but I'm going to get on track. We're going to make it happen. But he said, I unexpectedly though got the call from the Marine Corps. I was the closest chaplain when the 10 service 10 were killed last month. They came to me because I was the closest chaplain to where his family or their family didn't lived, and so I did the death notification for that Marine, did the ramp service for that Marine. That's where the body is brought back and given honors coming off of the plane, and then actually did the military funeral for that Marine and ministered to that Marine's family. And so here's again a chaplain, Air Force chaplain, nurturing and caring for and honoring doing those three central things that chaplains do. And it just has been such a privilege this week to talk to different chaplains who are in places as remote as Germany to, I think this other one was in the Midwest, and they're doing it cross-culturally. They're doing it across branches. The Air Force chaplain caring for the Marine Corps.
Yeah, and across faiths. I mean,
Oh,
to have
yes.
a rabbi and imam ministering to Afghan refugees. I mean, that
Yes.
is an amazing story.
Yes, yes. And so it just is so much rich opportunity and ministry that the chaplains get to be a part of, and the chaplains, all the chaplains I've met take that role so seriously and take it to heart to make sure that those core values are carried out wherever they are.
Wow. Well, so sir, and not to like ask you to list out a, billet description per se on an evaluation, but so I think most, at least for our listeners who have served, understand that a chaplain is a, key staffed unit, like you said, at a base level, the Pentagon or, Quantico, Pendleton, Fort Belvoir, et cetera, Ramstein. But I'm not sure that even for those who have served, fully understand what it is that a chaplain's does. Like, what would be on a billet description? So could you just, I guess, briefly sort of give an overview of like some of the implicit or explicit and implicit roles of a chaplain and what they provide to a commander, regardless of what level?
Sure. Yes. And they're obviously going to be different as they go through the ranks, but at the very basic level, chaplains are on the ground providing ministries to the troops, being with the troops in moments of joy, moments of despair, taking services to them whether you're a reservist out in the woods through a summer annual training period, or whether you're in the remote sections of Iraq and Afghanistan, you need an opportunity to worship, to nurture your spirit, and to continue to practice the faith that is important to your life. And so the chaplains go and are there to provide that religious support, religious coverage, we call it, religious support, we call it. And that's the most basic level. And I've already mentioned how we try to do that across different faith spectrums, so that the United Methodist minister maybe finds a way for a rabbi to be brought into the situation, or a Catholic priest, and so we try to provide that to everybody. Another piece of being there is like a counseling and coaching piece to soldiers. A lot of times soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines are in places where they need somebody to talk to. They need somebody to walk them away from a scary moment, a moment
Sure. I
of
mean, some of these young men and women, I mean, were just in high school not too long
yes.
ago.
Yes, yes, exactly. And so the chaplain is out there as as a listening ear, as an encourager, as a person that they can approach and can come to and can trust. We're outside the chain of command. We are not part of the command structure. So you go to the chaplain, there's confidentiality there, and you're not, it's not like going to a somebody that's the next level up in your structure that's going to need to report it to the next level up. It comes to the chaplain. It stops with the chaplain. If you just need to confide, the chaplain can be your confidential listener. So on the ground at that level, the chaplain is just in ministry and support to the troops. But then looking upwards, not just the chaplain's not ministering downwards, but the chaplain is on the staff of a commander, whether that's a battalion commander, brigade, however far up that goes, all the way up to the chief of chaplains being on the staff of the Army Chief of Staff. Every level has a chaplain related to a commander, and so the chaplain is in some ways another eyes and ears of the commander, somebody out there that is able to take the temperature of the troops, the climate, and advise the commander. In some ways, in the Army structure, it seemed like the chaplain and the sergeant major were the two people that the commanders usually relied on for that kind of temperature, because it seemed like the sergeant major and the chaplain were out and among everybody everywhere, and they could come back and bring back things that the commander needs to be aware of. And so advising the commander, and sometimes, as hard as it might be, a very implicit piece of that advice to the commander is the uncomfortable sometimes role of speaking truth to power. Could be there's an ethical issue, or there could be a challenge or a decision, and chaplain might have to say, "Sir, this is hard for you to hear, but I need to step into my advising role and advise you, as your chaplain, as an ethical perspective, and need to speak truth to power." And hopefully chaplains aren't afraid to do that, and are willing to take on that prophetic role. That's a sort of a scriptural role that the religious leader had a prophetic role to speak to a leader in government, in the country, in the world. And so that's part of what we do. I have one of my favorite commanders and mentors over the years that I still remain in touch with, has said that the chaplain and sergeant major were always his two key officers, the two key people on his staff. He said that when he got into higher ranks, he also had to add the JAG to that. Unfortunately, that became a advisor that he needed to have real close, keep close as well. But he just said that over the years, as on his staff, the chaplain and sergeant major were key leaders that he depended on and needed to hear from.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's very wise.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the chaplain obviously is focusing down, also has to look up. Does a chaplain ever look out? And I guess what I mean by that is that obviously we see a lot of data of religious affiliation sort of on the decline in the United States, but we see it increasing almost across the board internationally. And as we deploy and we go into places of unrest and of, where we're called to go, is the chaplain maintaining not only a pulse of the unit, but also a pulse of the culture? Or is that something that is not necessarily within the role of what a chaplain is supposed to do?
Right, right. And that is very true. The chaplain does have a role of interreligious engagement, intercultural engagement, and that was a piece that is very, very important. One of the mobilizations I had when in 2014 I began that 5-year stint. The first year I spent was as a deputy command chaplain at Central Command, and Central Command is in Tampa, Florida, so that's where I went to our headquarters there, and of course.
Yeah, for our listeners who aren't aware, CENTCOM covers all of the places that we've been over the last 19, 20 years at this point.
Yes, yeah. So the whole Middle East is part of CENTCOM, and very, very rich experience to go to CENTCOM again. I just the opportunities I've had to serve in places have been such a blessing, and there at Central Command, right next to the main command headquarters where everything, Central Command happens and all of our generals are and so forth, right next to it is a whole building, a series of buildings that are the coalition offices. And you go in there and walking up and down the hall, you go from Jordanian offices to German offices to British offices, and it's just everybody is right there. And that was part of my richest experience, was to go and to engage with those folks from around the world and to get to know them. And occasionally a chaplain or a religious leader from their country would come to visit them, and when that happened, usually myself or somebody from our team would go and have that interaction with that religious leader. And then the other thing that happened very frequently, Chaplain Waters, who was the command chaplain, my boss, spent a lot of time over in the theater, and a lot of what he was doing in the theater was engaging with religious leaders over there. And he would go, one of the biggest ones was engaging with religious leaders in Jordan and in Qatar, and he would have meetings with them and meals with them and build relationships with them. And so, especially at that more kind of strategic level, building those connections and those relationships was so critical. But I think on the ground in theater, the chaplains there were doing the same kind of thing with religious leaders and people that they were dealing with from the countries where they were serving. So yeah, chaplains have that kind of a role. I was just yesterday on a Zoom call with a colleague who is on the staff of U.S. Army Europe, and so that's a headquarters in Stuttgart, I think, in Germany. But in any case, he was just getting ready. He is a former he's a Wesley grad. He's on our board of governors actually, and works in the command chaplain's office for U.S. Army Europe. And they've tasked him to go to NATO countries and begin to have some dialogue on how to have more interaction and dialogue between chaplains. And so yeah, our chaplains are always looking for ways to engage. And another place where chaplains and Wesley Seminary has been engaging through the Command Chaplain of Africa Command, who again is another one of our doctoral students at Wesley, brought the president of Wesley and a team of Wesley faculty into Zimbabwe last year. It was just pre-COVID, so of course they could do that, but pulled together a cohort of chaplains from across Africa to interact with the Wesley faculty and be trained and experience some of what we teach at Wesley to chaplains across Africa through U.S. Army AFRICOM. So yes, chaplains are finding ways to do it, building connections for professional development, for interoperability. Interoperability meaning that if we were in some situation and there was a chaplain there from Germany, but chaplain from the U.S. was far off, well, they could, the German chaplain be prepared to cover for us, or vice versa, in those kind of situations. So
it's so cool. That's great. We've mentioned a few times, sir, Wesley, and obviously I'm a fan.
Yes.
So can you talk to us a little bit about just sort of the process? Like, how does someone become a chaplain? I know you mentioned that you were in the cadet program at Virginia Tech. Is that how quickly it starts, that just someone is in pursuit of a theological academic career, and then they decide, hey, I want to do this military ministry work as well? Or does somebody already have to be active duty and then they sort of declare it and then shift over? Like, how does the process work?
Sure. And actually, whenever I went through Virginia Tech, I was in the Corps of Cadets there, but did not receive my commission through that. And so, but I did have some of that experience, but people who have not gotten a commission through ROTC or through an academy or something can receive a direct commission. And I got my commission as a direct commission. It's a direct commission for chaplains and chaplain candidates who don't already have a commission. And
So you don't have to have your MDiv first.
Not as a chaplain candidate, you have to be enrolled in MDiv studies.
Okay.
Or the equivalent. Rabbis have their
Right.
equivalent, and imams have their equivalent, and so forth. But you'd be enrolled in the equivalent of the qualifying degree for your faith group. And so you're enrolled in that. You get a denominational or ecclesiastical, it's called, a religious endorsement from your faith group. So and every faith group has a person or a team who provide these endorsements, and usually they do interview either in person or by Zoom, and you go through several requirements that are set up by the religious group, but they say, yes, you are endorsed to be a chaplain candidate. And so you have that. It's actually a form that a DD form that is your,
it's always a DD form. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so you have that signed off by your religious group saying you are endorsed to be a chaplain candidate. And at the same time, hopefully I've been talking to a recruiter, and the recruiter is doing the military side of things. On the Army side, usually the recruiter does all the legwork, getting together transcripts and that kind of thing, but they also line the candidate up for a 06 interview with a chaplain colonel. And so I have done quite a few of those over the years and met some outstanding folks. But that's kind of the final piece to being a chaplain candidate, is having that 06 interview along with this endorsement from your denominational background, and then you can be commissioned. And if you got prior service, you get commissioned at a higher rank, obviously. If you are coming in just fresh as off the street as a civilian, then you're commissioned as a O1, a second lieutenant, or whatever the equivalent would be. I guess a ensign in the Navy,
Mhm.
and then you serve in a reserve capacity while you're continuing your studies. And then once you've completed your studies, completed your ordination, or whatever it is your religion has for your official standing to be a clergy person in that faith group, then you come back and go through a whole nother process. It's called a sessioning process through the military side of things. Maybe a interview with a panel of chaplains and review of your packet, and then are offered a commission as a chaplain. So it's not automatic. The candidate doesn't automatically become a chaplain, but it rolls over into being a chaplain. Now, not everybody becomes a candidate while they're in seminary. There are some people that choose to come in later. Maybe they've actually been out of seminary for 10 years and have been serving in a church or a synagogue or something, and they think that they would like to come into chaplaincy. And there's a whole cadre of recruiters who are out there who are available to talk to these folks and take them to the process of being ultimately commissioned as a chaplain, and whatever paperwork and interviews and so forth to do that. But
And is that a direct commission too? So as soon as they get accepted and then are given the official, you are a military chaplain, now you're worldwide deployable, or is there still a sort of scholastic process to get them up to speed on what a military chaplain is going to be doing?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and usually those folks at that point, they come in as a O2. So the chaplain candidate is generally O1s. When you come in as a chaplain, you're an O2, and every branch, Air Force, Army, Navy, I won't say Marines, because Marines
Yeah.
they pull their chaplains from the Navy. So all
That's
all
right, sir. Yep.
chaplains are Navy, but they all have a basic course. They've got a chaplain center. At one point, they were all co-located at Fort Jackson, but now they've kind of spread back out, and only the Army is at Fort Jackson anymore. But you go to where your basic chaplain school is, and there's a chaplain basic course that you go through that teaches military bearing, military standards, how to function in the military, since you're just coming out of a local situation in local church or military non-military setting. And so over a course of 3 months, 6 months, whatever it is for each service, are brought up to speed with the basic chaplain education, and then usually at some point after that, then brought up to being an O3. Very few chaplains stay O2 for very long. Most are around O3, but that comes after you've gone through this basic course. And so unless there's a contingency that is unexpected, and those have happened, and when they for some reason sent somebody out into a situation where they were really, really needed before having this education under their belt, usually they've gone through this initial entry education process and then are sent to a unit or deployed or whatever the next phase is in their assignment.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I think that's really great too, because I didn't know. I suspected, but I think that's one of the things I want to hopefully be able to drill down on for our listeners, is that the things that you suspect or assume maybe are or maybe not, but now, like you said, we're sort of bringing truth to power here, and so this is how a chaplain is, quote unquote, made.
So, and if you are interested in becoming one, we can stick around after this podcast, and I can put you in touch with a recruiter, and we can get you on the track to do that.
Do you take retirees?
Depends, I think, actually on the retirees on the retiree's age. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I
I
am I feel like I'm a strapping young man
There
still.
you go. So,
Well, sir, this has been fantastic. I did want to ask you one thing. And we mentioned professional development, and I know I'm monopolizing a lot of your time here, sir. This has been really great.
great. No,
Um, what were some of the challenges that either you faced or you understand that the Chaplain Corps faces in getting soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines to embrace spiritual development and spiritual education? And you'd mentioned that one of your roles as a chaplain is to be that counselor. So even if it's not necessarily a faith-based counseling, that you still are there as a mentor, guide, someone outside of the chain of command that they can come to with their problems and trust in your discretion and your professionalism and your counsel. But where do you find that it has been a challenge to mentor these young people, especially as we talked about, the current generation seems to be very apprehensive about institutions and the trust in institutions. And obviously, as a chaplain, you represent multiple institutions.
yes, right,
So
right.
where are some of those
Yes.
challenges, and then also where are some of those successes?
Yeah, yeah. I think some of the challenges are sometimes around finding a time and a place, just because our military is so busy and so many requirements placed upon military, responding to missions, responding to emergencies, responding to
Annual training
disaster.
plans.
Yeah, everything. And so finding just simply a time to fit it in. And of course it comes down to it's really a this is the religious plan, not of the chaplain. I'm not there with my religious plan, but it's actually a product and a responsibility of the commander. So it's really the commander's religious plan to make sure that soldiers have these opportunities. So a lot of this goes down to a chaplain and a commander developing a relationship, and the chaplain being able to have the commander's ear and convey to the commander how important it is to have these kinds of opportunities for personal growth, or for spiritual care, for spiritual growth. Right now on the Army side of things, there's a whole resource that's being released across the force for spiritual care and development, and it's receiving challenges. I mean, receiving support at the very highest levels. And so with that kind of emphasis coming from the highest levels of the service, when it gets down to where the rubber's meeting the road, commanders are going to say, oh yeah, that's a program that's actually coming to us from the Army, from the Marines, and we want to make sure that we give the chaplain a chance to implement that, whether it's some kind of resilience training, or integrity training, or whatever it might be. So to some extent, there are some things that are being driven as emphases that the commander is getting from above, and others are simply that the chaplain needs to make sure that the commander is aware of and has these tools. The chaplain has a toolbox that if he or she doesn't let the command know that I've got these tools that you can use to benefit your soldiers, developing that relationship, letting them know that there are tools for these various aspects that we can bring to the table and help our soldiers to grow. So it's so part of it is time, part of it is developing the connection with the command that's going to trust the chaplain to have the time and make the time. And then a large part of it again goes back to being where the soldiers are. And if soldiers have this distrust of an institution represented by the chaplain, and if the chaplain is only going to sit around in a chapel or in an office all the time, well, those soldiers aren't going to be receiving what the chaplain has to offer. And so the chaplain's got to be willing to do the muddy boots, to go to the places that are uncomfortable, when the theater, to go into places that can be dangerous sometimes, but to go to the soldiers and be among the soldiers, and without going out and being with them, never going to build those relationships and have that opportunity. And also that goes a long way with building the trust of the command. If the commander doesn't ever see the chaplain, the commander's out making rounds and never encounters a chaplain out there because the chaplain is back in a garrison setting. Well, commander's not going to be as inclined to call on that chaplain or pull that chaplain in for something. But if the commander's out and about, or if the commander takes a chaplain with them, I mean, that's as a commander maybe going out onto a point to check on some soldiers that are in a more remote area, chaplain, jump on the helicopter, jump in the vehicle and go and be with the commander to get out there and make those connections.
Nice.
So it's I guess a good word for it would be proactive, for the chaplain to constantly just be scanning for opportunities to be proactive in doing the ministry and the mission and being where the need is, proactive in doing that.
Yeah, engaged. I like that. Well, sir, I got one final question for you, and I really have appreciated all of this time. I just feel like a sponge and just taking it all in. But one of the things we ask of our guests, especially for our service members, is, and this, I know this is gonna be hard for you, especially with some of the career that you've had and some of the story you've already told. But what was your best day in the Army?
So, I you told me that you might ask this question. I've been trying to think about it, and
I find that we are the worst. Service members are the worst at talking about ourselves. So
right.
I had to prep you.
Yes, exactly. And it's hard to limit it to just one. Everything that we do involves people and involves the one thing about being a chaplain that is so amazing is the people invite us into their lives, or we step into their lives at the holiest of moments, the most meaningful moments, where they are just either in crisis or in joy, and we get the chance to be with them. I've had opportunity to do weddings for soldiers, and I've had opportunity, sadly, a soldier had a child who was tragically killed in an auto accident, and the soldier turned to the chaplain for counsel and ultimately to do that service. And so we have so many holy moments when we engage with people, and so I thought about some of those, and I also thought about after I finished it at Central Command in 2015, I came to the Pentagon and was full-time there, and had two hats there. One was in the Chief of Chaplain's office, and there I was receiving requests from the field to send chaplains forward to basically provide for religious coverage that there was a shortage of. And so I had a number of rabbis and Catholic priests, and I was putting them on orders and sending them to places where they were most needed. And so that was a marvelous ministry. And then the other hat I wore there was actually to go into the basement of the Pentagon and be the chaplain of the Army Operations Center. And if that wasn't a experience that was just rich and and so meaningful to be walking the halls there and ministering to people, and then and ministry by walking around is one thing that
Hmm.
we just do as chaplains, and that was so marvelous to do that, and and so I thought it had to be something from there. But then I thought back though, and went way back to that experience I told you about when I was called up to be the deputy Pentagon chaplain, and suddenly became the acting Pentagon chaplain, and an experience around that. And I'm going to tell you, I'll close and tell you that, because that was a highlight that still is one of the best days whenever I think about the time in the Army. But one thing that they have there at the Pentagon, and if you've not seen this, you'll want to take a trip in there sometime to see it, is on the site where the plane crashed on 9/11. Uh, that has been turned into a chapel. That is the Pentagon Chapel. And so when I was the acting Pentagon chaplain, that was my chapel, so to speak, and that was just a marvelous holy place. I tear up as I think about it, and would tear up anytime I'd be in there for a service, because to think of that place, it was a place of tragedy and such great pain and fear and death, but has been transformed into a place of holiness, a place of worship, and indeed it is used every day of the week for some kind of a service, and it gets transformed from a Episcopal service that happens at noontime on Wednesdays to a Catholic mass on Thursdays at 11 to a prayer service for Islamic soldiers on Fridays, and that space of crisis and hatred is the Pentagon Chapel, that is so beautiful. And so shortly after I had shown up there at the Pentagon, it was getting to be Hanukkah, and there was going to be a kickoff service in that chapel for Hanukkah, and it was going to be around, seems like it was around 11 o'clock or so on a Friday, and at that point there was a rabbi that came in from outside. I don't think there was a rabbi available in the Pentagon to conduct it, so there was a rabbi, uh, and I just lost his name, but he came in to conduct the service, and so I was there in my new role, and so the rabbi said, "Well, come on over and be here for our Hanukkah service. It'd be nice if you took part." And he gave me a yarmulke to wear on my head, and gave me a portion of Torah to read, and so here we are having a Hanukkah service, and in the midst of the Hanukkah service, the rabbi invites the Methodist chaplain to come and read scripture.
That's
And
beautiful.
wow, this is beautiful. The Jewish folks are here, and I'm with them, and so that was very beautiful. And we had a very nice Hanukkah service. And after the service was ended, the rabbi said, "Okay, now we're going to go across the hall. We've got the conference room up there, set up with some traditional Jewish foods for Hanukkah. So come on over and have some fellowship." And so the folks that attended the service went over, and I went over, and I was in there. I think I had another chaplain with me who I think was a Southern Baptist guy. So you had a Methodist, Southern Baptist, and the Jewish folks are gathered around for Hanukkah. And so then this is on a Friday. There is on Fridays, at that time at least, there was a noontime Islamic prayer service where the Islamic folks at the Pentagon could come down to the chapel and roll out their prayer rugs and have a time of prayer in the middle of the day. Well, these folks have started to show up for their service because it's noontime and the Hanukkah Jewish folks are just finishing up. And as the Islamic folks are showing up for their prayer time, the rabbi and some of the folks that are hosting the Hanukkah service say to those folks, well, we're getting ready to have our Hanukkah meal over here in this conference room, and you have a few minutes before your prayer time starts. Why don't you all come on over and join us for our Hanukkah festival? And so there we are, gathered around a table of Hanukkah foods in the center of the Pentagon. The Jewish worshipers and the Methodist preacher and the Southern Baptist chaplain and these faithful Muslims who are coming, and they are breaking bread together and sharing together in this beautiful time together. And I look at that as a highlight that's sort of symbolic of so much of what this whole ministry is about, and almost see that as like a if you will, a vision of heaven, of the kingdom of God, if you will, the varieties of people gathered around the table. And where does that ever happen? How many places? I can honestly say, in my 30 plus years of being a pastor of a local church, I can't say that I've ever had a dinner in the church basement where I had folks from the synagogue and folks from the mosque and folks from my congregation all together at one time. And yet that happened as part of my service as an Army chaplain at the Pentagon. And so that's just I guess a symbol of the whole thing, and kind of what still touches my heart and is so beautiful and meaningful. So my best day in the Army was probably a day when all of the God's people were gathered around the table.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, and especially to think that was the site where a force had tried to divide us
Yes.
and to exacerbate our religion, take advantage of our religious plurality,
Right.
and yet it was our religious plurality that really shone through there.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. That's a great story, and that's a perfect way to close this interview, sir. So thank you so much for sharing some of your life, some of your experiences, and giving us a little bit of insight into what the Chaplain Corps does and what Wesley Theological is doing. And so you're on LinkedIn, is that correct?
Yes.
So James R. Driscoll, Colonel retired, U.S. Army, on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Wesley Theological Seminary. Please check him out on, is it Wesley.edu?
WesleySeminary.edu.
Yep.
WesleySeminary.edu. Go there and you can see all the things Wesley Seminary is doing, and you can see some of there's a section there under Doctor of Ministry, and you can see what we're doing in Doctor of Ministry for military chaplains. Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again so much for taking the time to be with us today, sir.
Thank you, Vic. This has been an honor. It's been fun. It's been a privilege, and I am just so glad to make your acquaintance and have the chance to do this with you today. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. We'll definitely be in touch.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
Very good.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Bye now.
Scuttlebutt is a production of the Marine Corps Association. I am Nick Wilson. That is Major Vic Rubel, U.S. Marine Corps retired. We have also heard the voices of or contributions from William Truding or Nancy Lichman, editors of Gazette and Leatherneck magazines, respectively. Opinions expressed in Scuttlebutt are just that, opinions, and do not represent any official stance of the MCA.